Welcome to Future Ready Live, where we talk about topics that will help CPAs, CGMAs, and their organizations adapt and thrive in an accelerating, exponentially changing world. I'm your host, Tom Hood, the EVP of Business Engagement and Growth at the AICPA CIMA, the largest global body of certified professional accountants in the world, representing CPAs and CGMAs. Today, we're going to be talking about EY's latest research on the CFO and controllers' evolving roles in value creation. The first report, we covered the DNA of the financial controller, and then most recently, the CFO's evolving role in value creation that Myles and his team presented at our Future Finance Summit in December. So joining me is a repeat guest and somewhat of a friend now, Myles Corson. Myles, say hi to everybody.
Well, Tom, great to see you again, and thanks for having me back.
It's awesome to have you, and it was good seeing you at the summit. Myles is the global and America's strategy and markets leader for EY Financial Accounting Advisory Services. He leads a client-focused team responsible for helping global organizations address the impact of regulatory and transformational change in financial reporting and related systems and processes. With many years of international experience in established and emerging markets, he has managed complex multinational projects with some of the world's leading corporations, guiding clients through transformational change to prepare for the future. Change is the only constant, and as the world experiences the next wave of disruption through digital, finance executives have the chance to redefine the agenda and shape their role and the role of their functions as their organizations continue to evolve. Digital disruption creates a unique opportunity for finance executives to reevaluate how their functions measure, protect, and create value and support the strategic objectives of their businesses. He explores these challenges as the host of the EY Better Finance podcast, a series that explores the changing dynamics of the business world and what it means for the finance leaders of today and tomorrow. So Myles, this is exciting, and I want to start with the Future Finance Summit, where you and your team were with us in December in San Diego. Give us your big insights and takeaways from that experience.
Yeah, well, thank you, Tom. And I mean, I'd start off by just saying this is the second year that we've been involved, and the first year I've been able to attend, and I was blown away. And so, first of all, congratulations to you and to Barry, Kelly, and the whole team that put the program together. I think, one of the things that really stood out to me was the energy of the community that you've created. You've obviously got a lot of people that come back year over year, have established real connections, real network, and the sense of collaboration and team spirit as we tackle many of these challenges that you talked about in terms of the disruptions facing finance was just really impressive. Okay. I think you obviously put together a great panel of speakers, and what really stood out for me was it was a very holistic view. And whilst, as you'd expect, AI was very much front and center, everyone's energized and excited about the opportunities that it presents. There was a clear recognition and understanding that AI isn't the silver bullet. You need to be looking at the areas of data governance, data strategy. You need to be looking at culture and how talent evolves to be successful in really capturing opportunities that AI creates and presents. So again, I think that holistic approach and how everyone came together to really talk about it was fantastic. And it really, as we've talked about, the themes in our research and things we're doing are very much aligned with what you and the Future Finance Group have been doing. And one great example, just to share, you mentioned the podcast. I think we had a recent episode with Corey Hernserich, who's the lead at Modern Finance at Microsoft, and those things around how do you prepare for AI were very much what Corey shared in terms of Microsoft's journey. So Microsoft hasn't suddenly become the leader in AI overnight or by happenstance. They were very deliberate in how, again, they created the data governance, the data structures, how they managed the cultural transformation to help people go on that journey and be ready. So again, a lot of those sort of things were very much in parallel in that recent conversation. So again, I'd encourage people to check that out if they haven't seen it. But yeah, I mean, fantastic event, and I'm looking forward to being with you again in Denver later in the year.
Awesome. Well, we're going to drop a link to that in there because that's one of my favorite episodes, Myles, as well. And And you're exactly right. That it's funny because we've been tracking your stuff with our stuff, and we're like in parallel on most of all the concepts. And then Microsoft's got their modern finance initiative, which is what Corey's implementing. And that's similar, right? The same kind of, the top issues are identical. And it's been fascinating that's why we have a community, because no one knows all the answers to any of this stuff, right? We're all figuring it out and working it through it together, which is what's exciting about it.
Yeah, no, and I think that collaboration point is so important, right? Because there's so much complexity that no one organization, no one individual can tackle all of this. So it's going to take that, spirit of teaming to come together and solve some of these big challenges.
Yeah, I like to call it the wisdom of the crowd. But and then we did produce a white paper from all that, which we'll drop that in the link too. It's a big compendium of all the sessions and kind of deep dives in some of that stuff, which is pretty cool. So let's get.
Well, and again, kudos to you, because again, you with that, I know you use AI technology to capture. I mean, 3 days of very rich, very deep content, and you were able to produce this fantastic summary using an AI tool that again, really shows people the power and potential. So kudos to you for again, showing the technology in use. It was great.
Well, thank you. Yeah, we like to walk the talk, as they say. So yeah. Now let's talk about your research, because you and I have had some conversations about this, but the DNA of the financial controller, where you really talk about the evolution of the financial control. I know you've done a lot of work on the CFO movement, as we have, but this goes a step deeper, and this idea of moving from transactional to strategic finance. Talk to us about what this is and what you're seeing in the market around this.
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks, Tom. And as you say, we've been talking about how the role of the CFO has been evolving for a long time now. So I've been leading that program for over 15 years. And again, I think we've seen how the role has changed and evolved. Perhaps it isn't always as dramatic as some people like to make out, but there has very clearly been a significant evolution. And one of the key things, obviously, around the findings of that research has been CFOs need to build successful relationships with other C-suite executives, with boards, but also with their team. And as the CFO role has continued to expand, as the scope has expanded, obviously building a strong team around you becomes even more important. So again, as the CFO's role has evolved, we really identified we need to be talking about what does this mean for those CFO plus one roles. And so that was why we decided to start last year with the DNA of the corporate controller as, again, one of the key right-hand people to the CFO. We're actually this year we're just kicking off the DNA of the treasurer, which we're also excited because that's such a key role. And also, again, both controller and treasurer are key roles as stepping stones to CFO. So we're building up this picture of what is this kind of evolving finance leadership structure look like. So again, we've sort of drilled into what are some of the things that corporate controllers are feeling and experiencing. And I think the number one finding was 86% of the controllers that we surveyed, and this is a population of 2,000 global controllers, mainly in the corporate roles across a number of sectors, number of geographies, organizational sizes above $1 billion in revenue. So a very broad set of people that we surveyed. But the overwhelming majority 86% felt that this controller role is going to look very different in 5 years' time. And probably no surprises there. What was interesting is a very significant portion of that group don't necessarily know what the role is going to look like. And so I think what is really important is how do you build the agility and the flexibility, both personally, but also for your team, to adapt to this ever-changing environment. And in the intro, you mentioned change as a constant. And the recent CFO Forbes newsletter, the headline is "Disruption is the only constant." So again, I think we're all experiencing this very much firsthand. So that sort of macro change is really important. So as you think about what does that actually mean, and how do controllers start to adapt and change, there were some findings that we picked out, which first of all pointed to obviously some of the opportunities for controllers to change their role, change the perception of the role as well. And there were sort of three themes in that transformation area. As you'd expect, data and analytics, and reassuringly, almost 9 out of 10 of the controllers say they are very active in leading on data and analytics, driving insights, and we may come back and talk about some of the value creation aspects. But that is really just obviously such an important role, part of the role right now. So that was key. Interestingly, and perhaps higher than we were expecting, 2/3 of the controllers said they were frequently using AI. So on a day-to-day basis. So I think that's one we're certainly going to be exploring more, and you may want to share some views from the Future of Finance Summit. But again, what does that actually mean in practice? Because I think what we tend to hear from organizers, they're certainly looking at ways to use AI, but they aren't necessarily finding the sort of the killer applications right now in finance. So it may be that people are kind of using ChatGPT or local large language models to start experimenting with the capabilities of AI, but that one we think was worthy of some more explanation. But at least it shows that controllers understand the importance and are doing things around AI. And then thirdly, again, as you think about communicating value, the importance of non-financial and as well as financial information is clearly going to be increasingly in the scope of controllers, and an opportunity again to reposition and rebrand themselves. At the moment, less than half see themselves having a significant role in some of those non-financial reporting considerations in financial planning and reporting. So that there's potentially an opportunity there to take more advantage of that. And then, so the second theme is really about how do you get future ready, and how do you prepare yourself and your team. And interestingly, only about 20% of the controllers that we surveyed had technology in their top 3 drivers of value. And again, you think about the amount of time we spend talking about technology. If we're not translating that into value, there's a gap there, and it's really important. Again, you can demonstrate the return that you're getting from the investments in technology. Only 10% of the controllers said that they were given people with an innovation mindset. And again, as we talk about this disruption and the impact, having that innovative mindset, the ability to adapt and change is going to be really important. And so I think one of the things for controllers is how do you kind of help to create and foster that innovation mindset in your team? And again, for many controllers particularly, we've kind of operated in this world where certainty and getting everything right was a prerequisite. And so to now say, well, we want to innovate and do things differently is a little bit of a cultural reset. So how do you create the guardrails? How do you give people the sort of psychological safety to experiment in certain areas? And that tends to be more of the forward-looking things, whilst obviously the things about external reporting still need to be rock solid. So there's some interesting things there about innovation. And then I think connectedly, what was also interesting to me, only 1/3 of the controllers surveyed said that they frequently spend time on talent and career development for their people. And again, you think about the changes that we're going through, how the roles are changing, adopting. That's really important, I think, to think about how are you spending that time, because it's as important to be spending time developing the resources you have. As we've talked about in the past, there's obviously all the issues about talent acquisition and development and retention that we know are pressing concerns for many finance leaders that you and I speak to. So I'll pause there, but just that was a little bit of a sort of whistle-stop tour of some of the key findings.
Those are huge, actually, right? And so that's the notion of the controller moving in lockstep with the CFO, so to speak. They might be a few years behind in how that evolution, but that's where they're headed, right? They've got to be more active in that value creation, which means all the things you just said. They have to get better at developing their talent and their team. They have to get better looking at AI and uncertainty, which is not in the normal controller's DNA. And you talked about the idea of a confident controller. Give us a little background on that, Pete. I thought that was pretty fascinating in the report.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, Tom. And as you'll appreciate, with these big global surveys, we get lots of really good primary data and responses to the direct questions. But what we try and do is probe a little bit deeper into some of the themes that come through, and some of the stories that underpin the data. And so whether that's looking for cohorts and groups within the audience, we'll try and pick that out. So this idea of the confident controller was something that came through to us. And I think similar to the research that we've done with CFOs, we see roughly a 50-50 split between those that see the current role as a destination in itself and those that see it as a stepping stone to another role. So in the CFO forum, obviously a lot of CFOs have aspirations to move into CEO or general management positions. Yeah. Roughly half see the CFO as a destination itself. It's a very highly regarded role, has a lot of and as we've talked about, increasing influence in the organization. So similarly with controllers, what we found was there was roughly a 50-50 split between those that saw the controller as a destination itself and those that saw it as a stepping stone, potentially into the CFO role. And as we sort of probed more deeply into the data, what was interesting is there was this kind of split between the organizations with revenue north of $20 billion. And so again, these larger organizations had controllers that were more likely to stay in role. And again, you think about, well, why would that be? These are people that are very senior executives in very large, successful organizations. They're probably reasonably well funded. They have significant teams around them, and actually that group was more likely to be leading on innovation, on the talent development type questions that I raised earlier on. Yeah. They're more likely to be leading on, and sorry, that group was 3 times more likely to be leading on the talent development than the normal group. Mm-hmm. On the non-financial areas, they were more likely to be leading, 47% in that quorum, in that cohort versus 32% in the general pool. And they were also more likely to dedicate time to their own career development. And so, again, what it's telling you is actually there is an opportunity for controllers that really see their role as a destination to make an impact and drive transformation in their organizations. And that cohort was more likely to drive successful transformation. Whereas on the other side, you've got the group that, again, sees it as a stepping stone, who are perhaps a little bit more focused on being successful in the current role because it's what gives them the stepping stone to move on to the next role themselves. So I think one of the interesting things for me is, again, neither is right or wrong, but how do you understand, culturally and organizationally how you operate? And if you are putting people through those roles on a rotating basis, how do you make sure that there is enough continuity and enough focus on the transformation of the function? And that's, I think, something that is worth exploring, and we'll probably pick up in subsequent research.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I mean, you touched on a whole bunch of things there, but it would seem to me then that when you move down to that next level cohort, like below the 20 billion or into that next high middle market and higher, those folks need to get more attuned to both digital and talent development, right? Those are the two probably big areas that seem to be a bit lacking or behind in that group, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's good summation.
And then you and I talked about a while ago, which is a lot of times the finance team, even though they use a lot of the technology in finance, they not always understand the whole ecosystem and how it all works together. And I think as we move into this new AI era, they're going to have to get the data right. I think that's what we taught. And that was in your interview with Corey, I believe, too, how Microsoft had to spend time getting the data standardized into data lakes and organized before they could even access it with the real AI tools, the AI tools that are built into the financial software, separate from a Copilot or a ChatGPT interface.
Yeah, no, and it's such an important point, Tom. And I think again the evolving relationship between CFOs, controllers, chief technology officers, chief information officers is going to be really important, because again I think the understanding of the corporate data, the oil that flows through the pipes, is again an area where finance can bring real value, and just clarifying those roles, respective roles and responsibilities is really important. And bring it back to the controller context. I think the insight that controllers have, because of that historic knowledge, that understanding of the history and how the business has performed in the past, is going to put them in a very strong position to actually being more involved in financial planning going forward. Because again, what is going to feed the AI models is going to be the legacy data. So having that really solid data foundation is going to give controllers, I think, a platform to again expand their roles and play a much broader role, particularly in the value creation arena.
Yeah, I mean, it's fun. I remember early on when we were forming this future finance group, we had at that time, he was the CFO of Walmart, and one of our CIMA members who came from over in the UK, he said he feels like we're at this point, he calls it the great join, the joining of accounting, the traditional control, getting all the numbers right, and finance looking forward with that data. And that's what you're describing here, right? So that controller moving into value creation is exactly that. And he said one thing he learned is that the finance people with accounting backgrounds were better able to make sure the data was right when they created those projections than the analyst and the data scientist who didn't have that background. So it's an interesting mix of both of those skill sets that we need to create as we move into this next phase.
Yeah, and again, I think we see that in our business. Again, a lot of the graduates coming out, they're very much digitally and technologically native, right? They understand the technology, understand the power of the technology. So for us, actually, having people that are really good with the finance stuff and then putting the technology around it is the better approach. Because again, I think for us as a profession, for you as as a society, how do we kind of build the ability, particularly when some of those entry level type roles that have been the foundation, where people built that knowledge about how finance organization work, how things flow, is going to be really important. About how do we replace that, because that sort of understanding, that knowledge of finance and the importance of it is not going away.
Yeah, and that's one of our biggest challenges as we look at developing that next level with our CPA and CGMA, is how do we do that when you don't have all basically the internship, if you will, or the apprenticeship of doing all those numbers manually almost, or in very detail oriented, when you're going to have systems that are taking care of a lot of that, right? So you got to still figure out, where's this coming from? What's the source? And how do I know it's right? That's going to be different when you actually haven't done those transactions, we think, right? So that's going to be a different world from that standpoint.
Yeah, and I love your point about the great join, because again, this is about successful collaboration and getting beyond the traditional silos of technology and finance. It's actually, we've got to come together, technology providing the backbone, the way the data flows through the organization, finance as the user. But I talk about, we need to think about the way data flows through an organization and really identify those hotspots about where do you need the right people with the right information at the right time to make the right decisions. And again, you think about control environments, understanding those moments where actually the important decisions are getting made. And Microsoft talks about it, and I think I may have mentioned this before, around constellations of data and these kind of hotspots where, again, if you can really identify where that data is coming together, those are the areas that you need to really focus on.
Yep, that's great advice. I want to wrap. I want to wrap with the final thing from what you guys presented at the summit: this evolving role in value creation. And you had two stats that stuck out for me, which I've heard a lot from our community. Two things: one, 75% of the CFOs, so they've experienced at least one underperforming transformation. I mean, we're experiencing a little bit of that ourselves over here at AICPA CIMA, but. And then the second one was 50% of the finance workforce impacted by unsuccessful transformation said they didn't understand the leadership vision. Can you give us any your thoughts on that? Because I think those are A, alarming, and B, spot on.
Yeah, that's data from a piece of research that we did about human-centric transformation with the Oxford Business School, so Oxford Side Business School, and yeah, I mean, just to compound that 75% statistic, Tom. So 75% of CFOs have experienced a failed transformation in the last 5 years, right? So again, you think about the amount of money, time, effort that we're all investing in transformation. And I think, one of the things we talked about at the conference was transformation is a journey now, it's not an event. And so again, you can't afford to not get transformation right, because it's just part of everything that we're expected to do every day. So that was interesting itself, but actually there is a material difference between that experience of finance leaders and the broader general management pool. So in general, around about 65% of executives have experienced transformation. So it's almost like a 10% difference between CFOs and other executives. So that there is something that finance is probably not doing as well that is driving those outcomes. Now, some of it is going to come down to complexity, right? Again, because of the complexity of what we're dealing with. But I think when you again drill into the data and really understand what were some of the drivers of those transformation issues, a lot of it comes down to getting the people aspects right. Yes. And again, and I think you and I have a shared experience on this, Tom. When I'm doing these presentations and I talk, and you ask finance leaders to put their hand up if they're doing a transformation, and majority of the room will say yes, right? Because whether it's big T, little t, everybody is going through some sort of transformation. But when I then ask the follow-on question, so what is it you're trying to achieve with your transformation? I normally get two answers. One, it's a piece of technology that we're implementing, or two, we're taking cost out. And those are very important and very relevant tactics, but they're not the outcomes of the transformation, right? And this is where the data point around only 50% of finance people understanding the vision is really important, because if you're asking people to go on this journey with you into the uncertain, into the unknown, and potentially they're nervous because they're worried about what it means for them, what it means for their job. You've got to be able to communicate a vision that actually this pain that we're going to go through on this transformation journey is going to be worth it in the end, because we are going to be able to do things better. We're going to be able to do things smarter, more efficiently, and we'll be able to spend more time on the business partnering and the value creation side. So that to me is really important. And I've got Rory Sutherland coming onto the podcast shortly, and Rory's the vice chair of Ogilvy and Mather, the marketing and advertising agency. And the reason I reached out to Rory was I saw a quote that he'd made on LinkedIn, which basically summarized is finance people just care about certainty. And everything is about this efficiency driven to the race to the bottom rather than opportunity driven race to the top. And the punchline is a missed opportunity isn't measured on a balance sheet. And I think one of the big challenges for finance leaders right now is how do you shift from where we've traditionally been focused, which is very much on the cost and efficiency side of the equation, where we know the diminishing returns right now, because it's increasingly difficult to take cost out because we've already become so lean and efficient. And actually, how do you work in an environment where you need to be talking about investments and how you create value? And the big challenge is, the whole point of making investments in the unknown is you can't measure the outcomes. And that's where I think finance people struggle. And we have to create a new paradigm to say, how do we think more probabilistically than deterministically about making those investments? Because that, I think, is going to be the next frontier of challenge for finance leaders.
Wow. So I'm going to say, drop the mic on this one, Myles. That's like spot on. And to your point, the notion of vision, this came up early on in our future. So this was our fourth year. Early on in the first year, we had this conversation about, did they have visions for their finance teams? And quite a few of them did. And then that inspired the others to do that. But you're exactly right. You start a transformation, you have a small group that's leading it. They all get it. But to your point, everyone else doesn't necessarily get it. And when they start worrying about their own, is my job going to go, or what's going to happen to my team? Suddenly they slow walk all those transformations, right? And that's where they start to get in trouble. So vision critical. And then I love your notion of this idea of showing them the value creation. And we had a phrase that came out when they identified what the future looked like, and it was moving from rear view mirror to the windshield view. And you're exactly right. That's what you just described very well.
No, I love that, Tom. And women, just to be practical, one thing I would say is I think people can get hung up on vision being this highfalutin thing. One of the things that I've done with a number of my clients is actually just take a page out of the Amazon playbook and say, can you write a 6-page narrative memo that actually just summarizes what it is you think? Because I think too often, we create all of these PowerPoint decks and all this detail, and actually just lay out in words what it is you feel. And oftentimes what that will do is help clarify where you've got gaps or you've got lack of knowledge, where you need to work on it. But what it also does is provide you with an asset to share with your team and say, look, this really memorializes what we're trying to do, why we're trying to do it, and how we're going to do it.
Yep. That's what great advice, Myles. It was so good to have you back on here. By the way, you can note, I want to do a couple of things. First of all, follow Myles on LinkedIn, Myles Corson, or on Twitter. It's at Myles Corson, all one word. Follow his Better Finance podcast, and we'll put a link to that in the show as we notes today. And then also we'll put the note to the Microsoft. That was a great podcast. It confirms everything we just talked about. So with that, Myles, thank you for joining me. For our audience, don't miss other Future Ready Live sessions back here on LinkedIn the first and third Tuesday of each month at noon Eastern. We'll see you again then. And Myles, thank you so much for being back on our show.
Thanks, Tom. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. I always enjoy it.